Our own Steve Kornacki is already describing the results as a political earthquake in the Garden State.
But as the night went on, the most progressive candidate in the race, Analilia Mejia, had a come-from-behind surge to take the lead over the previous frontrunner, former Congressman Tom Malinowski.
Former Congressman Tom Malinowski has conceded the New Jersey special election.
The race attracted nearly $6 million in spending from outside groups, including one super PAC linked to the pro-Israel lobby Aipac, which spent more than $2 million against Malinowski, longtime supporter of Israel and former recipient of Aipac donations, after he supported putting conditions on U.S. aid to Israel. But all that money may end up helping Mahia, who has accused Israel of genocide, win the race.
Spoiler alert. Aipac did inadvertently help their biggest adversary win the race, because even though it was still too close to call days after the election took place, Malinowski did finally concede on Tuesday. So I never thought that I would say this, but thank you, Aipac. They thought that an establishment Democrat was a shoo-in and decided to try to punish one for not being pro-Israel enough in a desperate attempt to boost Tahisha Way, who was their preferred choice. But in doing so, they ended up sowing the seeds of their own destruction. But they say that they're totally not mad, guys. And as the Times of Israel reports, United Democracy Project, which is the PAC that's affiliated with Aipac, suggests that they do it again. Well, by all means, you go right ahead and do that, Aipac. Don't threaten us with too good of a time. But the best part is the way that they attacked him. Quote, Aipac pummeled Malinowski with $2.3 million in negative ads, but not about Israel. Oh, shocker. Instead, the ads tarred him from a progressive angle. One emphasized his vote on a 2019 bill that included increased funding for ICE, the Immigration Enforcement Agency. So they didn't just help tank the establishment Democrat. They proved our point for us by demonstrating that being a fence-sitting centrist is actually a political liability for Democrats. Masterful fucking gambit, Aipac. My hat goes off to you, truly. And I gotta say, I'm happy to see them harden their position on Israel now that Democrats are finally starting to realize that they can't expect to get elected if they unapologetically support a country doing a genocide. And even though Malinowski's performatively softer stance on Israel was still woefully inadequate, nonetheless, it's a sign that Aipac's influence is indeed waning, which is encouraging to see. And the more Aipac hardens their stance and demands unconditional support for Israel from Democrats, the faster they become completely irrelevant. The savvier Democrats already see the writing on the wall, and they realize that the times have changed. Democratic Party voters are paying close attention to who's funding these campaigns. Not to mention, Aipac's no longer the only game in town. Aipac Tracker is far more influential on social media than Aipac, and also the pro-Palestinian PALPAC, which stands for Peace, Accountability, and Leadership. They just launched on Wednesday to counter Aipac's influence in Congress. And I can assure you, Aipac sees what we're all seeing too. They might be evil, but they're not stupid. And that's all the more reason why they feel so inclined to punish everyone who doesn't toe the line, including their own puppets. Because any slippage in support whatsoever, and even the most small concessions, could lead to the dam bursting open. Because if one Democrat does it, then another might do it, and they can't have that. But like it or not, we are entering an entirely new era where Democrats are actually forced to choose between supporting Israel and winning, whether they like it or not. It really is a zero-sum game. If you support a country that is committing a genocide, 3 strikes, you're out. Period. Israel is in the process of de facto annexation of the entire West Bank as we speak, and a horrifying new analysis confirms that Israel, quote, evaporated more than 2,800 Palestinians with thermal and thermobaric weapons, which generates heat so intense they leave behind almost no detectable human remains other than bloodstains or pieces of flesh. And I can fucking assure you that any support for a country doing this is not going to be tolerated by Democratic Party voters going forward. So to the chagrin of Aipac, Democrats really do have no choice. They either adapt to this new reality or they fucking die out. And, you know, again, good on Aipac for overplaying their hand, because obviously it did not work out well in their favor. But having said that, I don't want to give them too much credit for Analilia Mejia's victory, because much like Zoran, she worked her ass off to pull out that win, and she was underestimated by virtually everyone at every step of the way, in the same way that Zoran Mamdani was underestimated by everybody. Nobody expected her to win. In fact, I hadn't even heard of her until last Thursday when super chatters on Leftist Mafia were asking me about her race. But with each passing day, it's becoming increasingly clear that New Jersey really is about to send their own version of Zoran Mamdani to Congress soon. And I'm growing more impressed every single time I learn something new about her. So much so that I think there's an argument to be made, and this is a stretch, but bear with me, that she might actually be better than Zoran Mamdani, which is a high bar to clear for elected officials, but she's made it abundantly clear that she is not fucking around, not with fascists and also not with corporate Democrats, because she's already calling out the Democratic Party's failed leadership. And this is something that you don't really see from newly elected Democrats, regardless if they're progressive or not. As Axios reports, she's refusing to commit to voting for Hakeem Jeffries as Speaker in the event Democrats take back the House. And it seems like the feeling is mutual, because she says that he hasn't even called her to congratulate her yet. But on top of that, she also has criticized leadership's approach. Andrew Sollander of Axios writes, Mahia told Axios that the 10 ICE reforms Jeffries and Senator Chuck Schumer proposed last week felt like a step in the right direction, but that some of these feel like redundant requests. Quote, I worry that when we put them forward as demands, when they are in fact already points that we have already secured as rights, that we almost normalize the administration's failure to meet the law, she said. Asked about Jeffries' leadership more broadly, Mahia told Axios that when Democrats try to meet Trump in the middle, you're kind of falling into this trap of accepting egregious behavior because it seems like it's halfway to where they're at when they're all the way to crazy. Quote, I think it would serve us as Democrats to realize that we can't meet them in the middle, she said. And this is why I am so impressed by her, because she is willing to call out the obvious weaknesses in the Democratic Party's leadership when everybody else is too afraid to speak up. And just to give you one example, really to piggyback off of her example, so in the battle over DHS funding, one of Schumer and Jeffries' demands is that ICE agents only enter a home if they have a judicial warrant. But that's already illegal. In fact, it's codified in the Fourth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. So if the Constitution isn't compelling them to follow the law, what makes them think that some toothless new regulation would compel them to follow the law all of a sudden? It doesn't make any sense. Like, I would say that it's naive, but we all know that Jeffries and Schumer are both doing the bare minimum to get us off of their backs and make it look like they're fighting. But I feel like if one of your demands is that the regime in power follow the law, you've kind of already lost the battle. So I'm really thankful that Mahia is making this point, because part of the reason why things are so bad right now in the first place is because we have an opposition party that is utterly feckless. And Mahia's criticism of Jeffries is part of the reason why I think you can argue she might actually be better than Zoran Mamdani. Maybe we're looking at Mamdani 2.0, because remember, Mamdani intervened to stop Chai Alsay from primarying Hakeem Jeffries from the left, even though he's not going to be directly working with Hakeem Jeffries as the mayor of New York City. Now, I can rationalize him endorsing Catherine Hochul because, you know, he's going to work with her to get his agenda passed. That makes sense. But he could have just said nothing if he didn't want to start a war with Jeffries. That would have made sense to me. But Analilia Mejia is very much different. She is going to be working with Hakeem Jeffries every single day. Nonetheless, she still chose to speak out, even though that's probably going to make things awkward between her and Hakeem. And I really respect that. And to be clear, I'm not making this point to shit on Mamdani. In fact, I've actually been thoroughly impressed by him so far. But I'm making this point to highlight how special Mahia is. Like, she is a diamond in the rough. She's another Mamdani. And I want to demonstrate how she is already willing to take risks to move the ball forward, which I think is really awesome to see. Now, look, to be clear, we've seen this before where newly elected Democrats talk tough and then ultimately fall in line because once they get to Congress, they realize, oh, there's no leadership alternative to vote for. So they end up acquiescing so that way they don't piss off the inevitable leader who's going to be doling out committee assignments that they want. I get that. At some point, Mahia will play politics just like all other politicians do. But to see her come out of the gate swinging this hard, that to me signals that she really may be cut from a different cloth. And if that wasn't already obvious enough from her criticism of leadership and opposition to genocide, her platform makes it abundantly clear. She supports taxing billionaires to fund childcare that's $10 a day. She supports Medicare for all, which includes free mental health, vision, and dental care that's all free at the point of service. She wants to cancel all student debt. She wants to impeach corrupt Supreme Court justices like Thomas and Alito and even expand the court if necessary. And unlike a lot of Democrats these days, she's making it clear that she's not going to let Republicans use trans people as punching bags. And at no point has she ever hid her agenda from the public. In fact, she ran ads calling for ICE to be abolished when so many Democrats still won't do that today, even in the year of our Lord 2026, after they've murdered multiple people. So she managed to secure her victory by being unabashedly progressive. And unsurprisingly, the right-wing fear-mongering about her campaign has already begun, but she's expertly using it to her advantage, as good politicians should. For example, she turned a Fox News attack into a de facto ad for social media, where they attacked her for supporting healthcare for trans people and Medicare for all and abolishing ICE. We've seen these slides before, and she boosted it saying, "I'm Analilia Mejia and I approve this message." And again, it's so refreshing to see this because for decades now, Democrats have always cowered in fear whenever Fox News turned them into boogeymen. Remember when Kamala Harris said that she supported abolishing private insurance companies in 2019, only to abandon that days later after she faced an onslaught of media attacks? See, this is how you respond to those kinds of pressure campaigns. Take notes, Democrats. You lean into the scary socialist policies and you double down, because even voters that don't agree with you are going to see that you stand for something, which is a problem that Democrats have. They have an authenticity crisis and they just look like empty suits who will say whatever they need to say to get elected. But it's nice to see somebody actually have beliefs for once in this party. And even though the media is going to inevitably downplay the role that her progressivism played in this campaign, since this is a blue state after all, do not let them gaslight you. I'm sure that most voters would probably elect a literal waifu over a Republican at this point, but regardless of the political climate, progressives are always going to have a leg up over corpo-centrist Democrats, because the former will turn out the base and get them excited, whereas the latter will suppress turnout by pandering to mythical moderate voters that will never ever vote for them. You have to excite your base. That is politics 101. Republicans learned that lesson. Democrats, it's your turn. You can learn that lesson too. But I actually do think that most elected Democrats, they are begrudgingly starting to come to that realization. In a different piece for Axios, Alexander Solander shared some reactions from Democrats to Mahia's upset, and they basically admit that they know being progressive is now the winning strategy for the party. A senior House Democrat asked if members were freaking out about their own primaries in the wake of the shock result, told Axios simply, "Yes, I definitely think this points to progressive anti-establishment energy," acknowledged a third House Democrat, a moderate in a swing state. Still, that lawmaker argued that too many moderate candidates split votes and endorsements, and that if the establishment and money all got behind one candidate like what normally happens, Mejia may not have won. In other words, they're sweating, because they know the lie that they fed voters for decades about how they have to be diet Republicans to be more electable is falling apart. Even the most normiest of Democrats now know that they were fed that line of horseshit to justify them selling out to large multinational corporations. They tried to frame their corporate neoliberalism as some high-minded electability strategy and just a more pragmatic form of politics in general, even though they were hemorrhaging support because of it. But now the jig is up, and they know that that is indeed the case, and it is scaring the shit out of them, because they're well aware of the fact that every single vote that they cast in Congress and every single dollar they take is going to be hyper-scrutinized by voters. And you know, they can bitch and moan about purity tests all they want, and I'm sure that they will, but it's not going to change the fact that voters finally see the game that's being played and they're done with it. And even though Mejia still is going to have to face off against her Republican opponent in the general election on April 16th, there is a very, very, very high chance that she's going to win. I'd say it's overwhelmingly likely. And I think that, you know, even if Aipac and centrist Democrats intervene to rat fuck the election and boost her Republican opponent, she's still going to win, because this is a pretty blue district. So even though I'm a little late to the party on this particular race, I still wanted to take some time to talk about it, because I think it's really important to cherish moments like this, because obviously we don't get them too often. And the best part is that this might not be the only surprise victory that we get. There may be other Mejias and Mamdanis out there that we still don't know about yet. But if you're struggling to keep up with all of the great candidates like I am, I'm going to put a link to my buddy Secular Lefty's new YouTube channel in the description, and highly recommend that you check him out, because he goes into painstaking detail about the dynamics of some of these Democratic Party primaries, and he highlights which candidates support Medicare for all and abolishing ICE, and also helps you to avoid shitty candidates who take AIPAC money. Basically, he tells you everything you would need to know about the dynamics of these primary campaigns from the leftist perspective. And on his Blue Sky, he often shares super helpful graphics like this with the dates for all of the upcoming Democratic Party primaries. And he showed me a giant spreadsheet that he made with all of the information that he put together, and I was blown away by the amount of detail. Like, he's not getting paid for this, by the way. He still has a full-time job, but this is just a passion project of his, and he desperately wants to get rid of all of the corpo Democrats in Congress. So definitely go subscribe to him on YouTube and tell him that I sent you, because he's doing a thankless job, and I think that good work needs to be rewarded. And also, it definitely make his day. So go subscribe to him. But Mahia's victory, it did make it more apparent to me that I should try to follow these races a little closer, as hard as it may be with everything going on, because I don't want to learn about one of these races after the fact and think that we could have given a particular candidate a little boost that they needed to cross the finish line. So Mejia's win is definitely a cause for celebration, but it's also a reminder that these races are sometimes super close. And if a strong left-wing candidate is running in your district, you should definitely not sleep on them. Don't get me wrong, like, it feels good to see a pleasant surprise, but it'd feel even better knowing that you contributed to their victory. And we'll leave that there.